Okay, welcome back everybody to part 2 of this episode, Lunch and Learn, on Thursday, dropping at noon. On Tuesday, we were talking about your goal to plan to succeed, and one way you can do that is to buy a planner and document everything you want on your planner as it relates to money and other things in your personal life as well. So grab a beverage and join me for this episode where we're going to be talking about some thoughts I have about the distribution phase, the first year that you want to stop working. What does that look like in terms of the money that you've accumulated over many years? So cheers, grab a beverage. Okay. So last time I brought up this document, or this book I should say, where I have a lot of my thoughts written down on pieces of paper. I've shared this with you before. This is my money map for the years where you take things like your taxes, true expenses, fun and other, and your open to buy savings and investing to money map how much money you have coming in and how much money you have going out. But what I wanted to share with you in this episode, in addition to remember my true expenses, these are my true expenses for 2025. I'm going to take a minute and share this with you. And again, this can help you as you think about positioning yourself in the future to keep your expenses as low as they can be, which means you don't have to save as much money in your engine to pay for your expenses. So keep that in mind. And, I always share with you guys that most people that make $100,000 or $120,000 per year, as they get older especially, typically don't have expenses that are as low as mine. In fact, I remember back in 2012 when I was considering buying another condo and maybe selling this one, I talked to a mortgage broker, and he couldn't believe that my mortgage was as low as it is for the amount of money I was making, and my car payment was virtually zero, and most people had car payments that were what my mortgage was at that time. And that has been my thought process through multiple years. And that's what helps get you to where you want to be, is always thinking about keeping your expenses down. So I know I shared this with you before, but my true expenses when I think about 2025, I'll just go ahead and list them. Food, $62.40. Gas, $7.80. Electric, $8.40. Internet, $1,000. I'm going to reconsider internet. I think that's kind of high. And in fact, sometimes I start thinking, how can I get rid of one expense and add another? I want to join LA Fitness. So in my budget, I'm like, you know what? Do I really need to spend that much on internet? There are other companies I could go to and get something a lot cheaper. So I'll be considering that. And then in my mind, I always think, do I really need the internet at all? Yes, I have to upload to YouTube, but could I think of other ways to do that? Because with our cell plans now, you have the hotspot, and the hotspot can power your devices. So anyway, yes, I obsess over money. So internet, about $1,000. Cell phone, $360, believe it or not, through Visible. My association fees for my condo, $7,200. My property taxes are $620, pretty low. Car insurance, about $1,300. My 2 condo policies, $2,200. I know that seems relatively high, but remember I live in Florida in a flood zone. So those are relatively high. Healthcare. Do you remember I have to put in a line item for healthcare because I'm going to retire, obviously, before the age of 65 when Medicare kicks in. So because of the regulations or the laws right now with Obamacare, and the Biden Affordable Care Act, and we don't know where things are going to go after the new president comes in, but we are allowed as early retirees to get tax credits on health care, which means if I normally was going to spend $800 or $1,000 a year, maybe it's only $150 or $200 a month versus, $8,000 or $10,000 per year, if that makes sense. So I'm building in a buffer because I know with healthcare for health and dental, I'll need to pay maybe $2,000 per year. But what you do is you build in buffers. So if I'm wrong and I have to spend another $8,000, then I can certainly do that. So for true expenses, though, I build in $2,000. And then for fun, about $2,700. Because I know with YouTube, I'm making X amount of dollars per year, and I offset that as well. So, which is not much by now, actually, so far. I've made about $400 on YouTube. I think I shared that with you before. So true expenses, about $25,000. But really, I would probably need more money for fun and other. So I built that into the plan, but I wanted to get a baseline of what the expenses were, and that's what it turns out to be. And the other thing you do in your budget, because, if you quit working, then you have money that you either use from investments or from short-term reserves, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it's a different mindset because now I don't need that much money in my checking account because some of these expenses are monthly, some are yearly. So what I've done on a new spreadsheet, which I'll probably share with you a little bit later, I've just now started building it for 2025. But I have 3 different areas. Let's see if I can remember what they are. Monthly expenses that I need in my checking account. Electric, internet, association fees, and healthcare. 4. So I think that's about $1,800 monthly, something like that. So what I'll do is I'll transfer that money into the checking account to pay for those expenses on a monthly basis that really have to come out of my checking account. For the other monthly expenses, food, gas, and fun will go to my 0% credit card. And I'll take money from the budget per se, but it really is going to go into the credit card at 0% for I think up to 2 years. I have a new credit card that I think it's 21 months where I'll have 0%. So in 2025, I'll just use the credit card, keep the money in my savings account at 4%-ish, and then pay it off when it's due. So that money obviously is not money in my checking account, if that makes sense, even though it's a monthly expense that I'm allocating in my budget and tracking. So that's the first area of money I have to put into the checking account to pay for those monthly expenses. The next bucket down is my true expenses for 2025 that are the yearly. Things like cell phone, I pay that yearly. Property tax, yearly in November. Car insurance, yearly in December. And the 2 condo policies. Did I just say that? No, car insurance and then the 2 condo policies, yeah. So those monies, the totals would be there, but then I would transfer the money from my checking account, where I'm going to be pulling from, which I'll tell you in a minute, into the checking account to pay for those. So it's a wash. Bring the money in, sweep it out. There's no sense in bringing that money into the checking account. You can keep it in your investments or your short-term reserves until you need it and bring it in. The third area of the budget then is the allocation for fun and other, which again goes to my credit card. So the monthly expenses, the yearly, and then the deductions that go to the credit card to pay off all at once that 0% ends. The other thing I wanted to share with you as a complement really to these episodes this week about going into early retirement in January of 2025 is that by talking to my financial advisor at Vanguard, as you know. His name is Chris. Remember, if I haven't told you yet, in these episodes, I talked to him and I said, you know what, Chris, it's about time for me to figure out my distribution of money. Like, where do I pull from first? Where do I get the money to live the first year, the second year, the third year? And that's what's great about going into retirement is, again, I've said this before, you don't just stop planning your financial life when you quit working. Now you start with, here's how much money I have. I'm not adding more to it per se, unless I get another job, which I don't plan to do. And you ride every year and you figure out, oh, I'm paying myself X, but my investments are going up. And you try to preserve the principal. Not always do you have to preserve the principal, because you may or may not need to leave a legacy to heirs, to your family, etc. And you might need long-term health care and things to pay for later anyway. You can fund that yourself, or you can buy policies against that risk. So in retirement, you're balancing it just like you are when you're building the wealth. You have to manage the distribution as well. Cheers. Okay. So I was saying, Chris, he said to me, Evan, what are your thoughts about your distribution? Like, what would make you feel most comfortable? And I said, Chris, as you know, I've been hoarding cash for 3 years now, rather than maxing out my 401k, which I tell you guys to do if you're pretty young. But once you get close to retirement, you need cash reserves. Why do you need cash reserves? Because if the market goes down, you don't have to sell shares, you use your cash instead. It's called a bucket strategy. So at the end of 2024, as long as I get the bonus that I expect to get, I'll have $152,000. I think I shared that with you in these episodes this week, so some of this might be redundant, but bear with me because I'm going to share some things with you that I think is significant. I think I did share with you, obviously, I'll have that $152,000. Well, I did a 5-year plan. Year 1 of retirement, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. Year 1, I'll be 59 in 2025. Year 2, I'll be 60. Year 3, I'll be 61. Year 4, I'll be 62. Year 5, I'll be 63. Do you remember I said, if I haven't said it yet in these episodes this week, that my Vanguard guy said, Evan, you should probably take Social Security early to offset the need that you have because you've got so much money. They usually advise people to wait until 67 or 70 to take Social Security if they don't have as much money as I do, if that makes sense. Because then they'll get more because they need the more because I haven't saved as much. But he said your strategy could be that you would take Social Security at 62 to offset the need, which means you can stretch your money longer. Okay, so let's say I wanted to pay myself $30,000 per year. Do you remember just a little while ago I was saying I needed 25? Well, I'm adding that, or I'm bumping it up to 30 to make the fun another $7,500 in that equation, which I think is pretty good. So let's just say the need is $30,000. If you have $152,000, you take 30 away for year 1, you take 30 away for year 2, you take 30 away for year 3. So that's age 59, 60, and 61. But for age 62 and 63, I'll be getting $20,000 from Social Security, which means I only need $10,000 of cash. Make sense? Social Security subsidizes the need. So year 1, 30, year 2, 30, year 3, 30, year 4 and 5, age 62 and 63 would be $10,000 and $10,000. So if you subtract all that out, you still have $42,000 left of the cash reserves that I had for the first 5 years. Now, if I am wrong, and if a new president comes into play and they get rid of those tax credits that I talked about, for healthcare before I get to age 65, that $42,000 essentially is a buffer of $8,000 per year times 5 is 40. So for those 5 years, age 60 through 63, 60, 61, 62, 63, 60, 61, 62, 63, 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess it would only be 32,000. Anyway, that 40,000 is a buffer for if healthcare for me is more than the 2,000 per year that I build into my true expenses. If it's 10,000 a year, then you take 8,000 and you have that money set aside as a buffer if it's needed, which would virtually bring that 42,000 perhaps to zero, or maybe about 8,000 or 10,000, if that makes sense. Now, I think I shared a lot of that with you on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, but here's what I want to say for today. And what I learned, and I'm going to share and repeat what I shared with you previously about, remember, if I haven't said it yet, that I'm going to take my 401k, which is $800,000, which is $600,000 of pre-tax, $200,000 of Roth. I'm going to open up a traditional and move $600,000 into a traditional IRA, which I have not yet paid taxes on, and that money's going to sit there for 10 years or more. I think I shared that with you before this week. That's something I learned that I didn't even think of as far as a distribution strategy. Hopefully that makes sense. So what I'm doing is that traditional IRA, $600,000. Now my Roth IRA of after-tax money that you can use even before you get to 59.5 for those of you that want to retire even before I did. Make sense? So in the financial independent community, they say, build that Roth IRA up because you can still take money out of that account if you needed to. What you contributed into it, not the earnings, if you needed to. And also a traditional account that I have, I could have used for money, but I don't need to because I'm almost 59.5 anyway, if that makes sense. And I'm not going to take from investments. The main thing I want to share with you right now is that back to the short-term reserves for 5 years is that 600 traditional, 400 Roth, and 200 taxable is 1.2 to 1.3 million, right? So when I stop working next year in 2025, that money of 1.2 or 1.3 million is going to sit in those accounts untouched for 5 years. Do you remember when we talked about Coast Fire? If you're super young and you want to save a bunch of money and you get to 40 or 50 and you decide to not save anymore, but you've saved all that money, then it continues to grow. Remember that topic? You can apply this in retirement as well. My short-term reserves is there, and I'm not implying that I have to do this. I could still dip into the investments in that first 5 years. But I think I'm going to choose not to. I think I'm going to let it grow because if you just do the math, if you take 1.3 million for 5 years, untouched, growing at even just 5%, because we don't know what's going to happen in those 5 years. So let's do a very conservative 5%. It would grow to 1.6 or 1.7 million. See how that works? So you've got all that money in those investments. It's going to sit there, and it's going to grow by $400,000 to $500,000 just by letting it sit there. So then when I get to age 64, and again, this is just an idea. This is not how it will pan out, maybe, but potentially then at 1.6 million at age 64, a 4% withdrawal on that is $66,000 a year. Plus the Social Security of 20 is $88,000 per year. As opposed to me perhaps spending less in the early years, which really, when you think about it, could be swapped out. A lot of people want to spend more money in their first 5 years of retirement, But I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be like that. I think I'm going to be super conservative because that's who I've become. That's what made me a millionaire to begin with. So I don't think I'm going to spend money and find enjoyment in spending money. I think I'm going to find enjoyment in doing other things that don't cost money. And I'll be sharing that with you as we go. But the most significant thing about today's episode, I think, is, again, what I learned is that Vanguard, my advisor, kind of agreed with me. Again, I could still tap into the investments in the first 5 years. Oh, and by the way, you do have to do that a little bit because in order to qualify, remember, for the tax credits, you have to show a little bit of income. I think it's about $14,000 per year to qualify to get the credits of healthcare. So I'll talk to my tax person, and he may advise that I sell some shares either out of the taxable account, which is a little bit different because I funded a tax account with after-tax income. There's capital gains and all those kinds of things that I don't quite understand, but maybe I would sell a part of that and or the traditional IRA that I talked about, that $600,000, just to get $15,000 a year so that at the end of the year, when you do your taxes, you show that you've sold some shares to qualify to get the tax credits. So what happens is you get the tax credits every month. At the end of the year, when you do your taxes, if you actually made more money or you sold more shares of investments and you suddenly go over, I think it's about $50,000 a year or something like that, it's 400% of the federal poverty line, I believe, and then you would not qualify for any tax credits. So in order to maximize that benefit, you sell just enough shares, even though I'm using cash, right? Sell a little bit to offset that, which makes the cash last longer, by the way. And then you get your tax credits. And I build in the buffer just in case those tax credits end with the new president coming into office, because Biden extended the Affordable Care Act, through the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, through the end of 2025. So that could affect my year 2, 3, 4, and 5 before I get to age 65, something like that. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. This is just a coffee talk ramble, talking through what I've been talking through this week, which is the decision I made finally to go into early retirement. So take care, guys, and I'll see you on the next episode. Hello. Three, two, one. Wait, stop. Over many years. So, cheers. Join me for this episode. You'll have to do an edit here. You'll have to do an edit. I'm waiting for the AC to turn off. Okay. So cheers.